Good morning and welcome to World Talks with me, Daria Strzemska. In a bid to foster friendly relations with potential EU members, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has traveled to Moldova. There he took part in a series of high-level meetings with Moldovan officials, including Prime Minister Dorin and President Maia Sandu. To take a closer look at the visit and assess its importance, I have Wojciech Przybylski, Editor-in-Chief of Visegrad Insight, joining me right now. Good morning, sir. Delighted to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let me start with a very basic question. What was Tusk's aim in visiting Moldova?
Well, the aim is at least twofold. On one hand, Tusk visit corresponds to the referendum and the presidential campaign scheduled to take place in late October, in which Maia Sandu, the incumbent president, is seeking re-election and confirmation of the European path of Moldova towards the accession. She also announced a referendum that would modify the law of the Moldova so to inscribe the direction towards the European integration. And that is going ahead the disinformation campaign, the hybrid operations orchestrated by Russia from Moscow to stimulate the post-Soviet elements in the Moldovan society against this direction and to mobilize both against her candidacy and against the direction that Moldova has taken. So that's one dimension in which Prime Minister Tusk decided to engage, supporting and not instantaneously, but he has actually underline how for many years Moldova has been receiving Poland's support in this direction and to mark its success. And on the other hand, it is also a signal and a communication both to Poland and all of the EU where Poland matters in the upcoming EU presidency of the European Union Council, and the presidency top priority will be progress on enlargement.
Right, so let me follow up on the first part of your statement. How prevalent is this pro-Soviet sentiment in Moldova? I mean, is majority of people pro-EU, or is there still a chunk that are sort of more pro-Russian, one would say?
According to most of the opinion polls, we have an advancement of the views of pro-EU, of basically continuing the reforms and eventually joining the EU. This is more than 50%, but that's only more than 50%. It's not a decisive majority. Recent opinion polls conducted by several institutes, including an International Republican Institute and several others from around the summer, indicate that majority of the society is going to vote in the upcoming EU referendum and the presidential elections. But it is not guaranteed that the vote will give the final outcome as desired by the pro-democratic and pro-European forces in Moldova and across the EU. So that's that 50+% is not a given victory of the current direction of Moldova.
So why is EU so insistent on enlarging? Why is it so important for the European Union?
Well, that's on the global scale, the only policy in which Europe truly matters. It is a transformative power of the European project as a peace project, as a project that delivers prosperity, stability, and rule of law, democracy on the continent of Europe, with a remarkable success and a track record for the past 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, which is unprecedented in all of the history of centuries-long tradition of wars and conflicts. So the enlargement is essentially a peace process on the continent. The only viable and stable one so far has proven itself to be giving the stability and prosperity to the Union. And this is why it is so crucial in this given global context to have the enlargement pushed forward, including Moldova, the Western Balkans, and most importantly, Ukraine.
Right, so 2028 has been the date that was floated, but some are saying that some of these countries may not be ready by then, and would rushing it perhaps have some serious consequences? What would you say to these voices?
Well, there is no rush, and there are fundamental reforms being undertaken by Moldova and by Ukraine. Somewhat there is a bit of a stalling of reform process in a number of countries in Western Balkans. But this is not to be blamed only on the Western Balkan countries, but it's also to be blamed on some of the forces within the European Union that weren't really pushing for reforms and preparation for this accession process. Donald Tusk at the conference mentioned that the Hungarian presidency in the European Union Council that is ongoing until the end of this year is unlikely to deliver any success in terms of progress on the enlargement. And this is the example that is a negative example against this background, Poland wants to see reforms pushed forward, wants to assist, like many other member countries in the EU, they want to assist Moldova and then Ukraine and Western Balkans in actually delivering the changes which are at hand. I mean, it's a low-hanging fruit, in fact, which is accessible to the candidate countries. And then it will be very possible to see these as new member states in the EU.
So, and in case of Moldova specifically, would Transnistria be an issue in Moldova's sort of joining the EU eventually?
In short, no. In the longer form, there are many ways in which Russian operatives in Moldova are trying to undermine the process. In Moscow, a number of opposition parties, including the corrupt ones banned from Moldova, has signed a pact earlier this spring, in late spring, to stand against Maia Sandu, against this political direction in these elections and in the referendum, to oppose the direction of Moldova into the EU. This is a clear signal of Moscow meddling in the internal politics of Moldova through not so much Transnistria, but primarily through Gagauzia region, a region of Moldova in the south with Gagauzan minority living there, where a number of referendums in this particular enclave have demonstrated that majority of the population there is prone solely to the communication from Moscow, and they've been opposing the European direction. But this is by no means a majority of the country overall.
Right, and so when Hungary took over the presidency of the Council of the EU, Viktor Orban went on this trip, right, this very controversial trip to China, Russia, and so on. So what do you think Poland will do once Poland takes over? What will be the characteristics of our presidency of the Council of the EU? Will Donald Tusk travel somewhere else, perhaps?
Well, I can't speak for what will be the plan of Donald Tusk to travel, but definitely we will not see the kind of joker face like Mr. Orban has played with, performing the service of the European Council presidency. This is a service in the interest of the whole Union and all other member states, and at the same time play a very particular, sinister politics in which he's been essentially serving the interests of the big adversaries and officially declared and also undersigned by Hungary, adversaries of the European project and European interests. So, in short, you will not see anything like that by Mr. Donald Tusk. You will actually see his leadership in the European Union consolidating around the direction he has set forward, and Poland has set forward throughout many governments before, pro-Western, for enlargement, actually pragmatic and really showing deliverables in the European project, just cheap talk and PR show like Mr. Orban.
I guess many are looking forward to this change in the presidency of the Council of the EU. Now, let me ask you about migration, because some of these countries that are in the pipeline, if you will, to join the EU in 2028 are being used as migration routes currently by some of the illegal migrants. So do you think that this will influence EU's migration policy? Will this still be an issue? What is the EU doing to address that?
Well, for once, historically, we have seen that members joining the EU and being successful after joining the EU see actually the reverse flow. So after the initial flow of migrants from Poland to the other countries of the EU, previously UK, Germany, France, you are seeing a complete reverse direction. So people are coming back and actually coming from abroad to Poland because it's a country of success. This is very likely to be seen in the cases of other countries once they join the EU, and this is going to stabilize the situation, which is putting some countries and societies in the EU on the edge. Because if you create conditions for prosperity and peace, people want to come home and be with their families and to develop the prosperity and security of their homeland. So that's it. That's in brief why enlargement is a solution partly to the migration. But the other dimension, it's very present day situation, is that the countries that do not want to join the EU, like Belarus or Turkey, are officially the countries through which migration is either sponsored or facilitated. Oftentimes, in case of Belarus, we have seen that it has been essentially special services and state-sponsored illegal border crossing, which is the problem of security and not really of migration.
Right. It's good that you mentioned Turkey, because it is a very interesting country. I guess they do sort of, consider, or would like to perhaps be considered to join the EU, but also they decided to join BRICS recently, and they are in the process of doing so. So I wanted to ask you, do you see this increased divide in the world between the West and the East, with more countries joining alliances such as BRICS, for instance?
No, there is no East-West divide. I think the world is much more diverse. There are a number of narratives that try to describe it. Part of this narrative speaks of global South and North. It doesn't have that much to do with also geographical direction, as we know. It's more of a sense of countries that want to consolidate prosperity and security, and those who feel insecure and they want even to some extent take revenge against the formerly colonial powers in the world. And I think this tension is quite clear between the zones of rule of law, security and prosperity, and those who try to undermine it because they see opportunity for themselves to actually join a more prosperous club, but not through the means of the official accession, but rather by certain disturbance or disruption in the world affairs. Well, I think it's a wrong path to take, and it's not very constructive.
Wojciech Przybylski, Visegrad Insight, thank you, sir, for being with us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.